Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, October 20th, and I'm your host, Marty Bennett. Today, we're going to be walking you through three themes we've been hearing over the past few weeks that we'd like to go a little bit more in depth to help you broaden your exposure to these topics and perhaps gain some insight into nuances within these topics that might be able to help you do what you do better on your campus. First up, can you recruit international students without recruitment platforms? Second, are you engaging in partnership building in India? And finally, what are your strategic plan priorities? We'll talk about those. We've been talking about these themes quite a bit, particularly on the ed tech explosion and strategic planning over the past several weeks. And we're covering different elements of that today, but we want to really spend the time over the next half hour going down in the weeds a little bit to talk more about these issues and what's really involved in making it a successful part of your overall international education strategies on campus. So before we get to that first question, special welcome to those watching live here on Facebook. Always a pleasure to have you part of the conversation each week as we talk through these issues. Also to those watching on repeat, either on our YouTube channel or on our Facebook page for SMIE Consulting. We know your time is valuable and you can't always catch us live, but we appreciate you making the effort to hear what we have to say. And finally, those that download the podcast each week to enhance their international edification, whether on their runs, on their walks, on a stress break as they're trying to answer emails, whatever it might be. Thank you again for including SMIE Consulting in your international edification. So let's get to that first question. We do bring the stories of the week that we cover here on the Roundup. We do have those initial news stories that come out in our newsletter on Monday mornings at 9 a.m. Eastern. A copy of the most recent edition is in the chat comments section on the Facebook page for this event. And also, you can subscribe to the newsletter free of charge on our website at smieconsulting.org/subscribe, where you can also find an archive of all past editions over the last 3 years now. So we'll get to these questions now. First up, can you recruit international students without recruitment platforms? And this is, to be clear, we're talking here about the various ed tech providers, these agent aggregators, these service providers that are out there that promise millions of visitors to their sites each year. They document that in various ways, but these are the folks that can give you that bang for the buck in terms of exposure for your institution to the widest range possible of potential students. And then deliver those leads to you and allow you to then nurture them through your communication flow and your other recruitment funnel activities that you have set in place to bring new students in each year. So that's really the theme here is to answer this question in light of the larger ed tech explosion we've been experiencing and all the various providers that are jumping up, some of which have been around for well over a decade. Others are much newer on the scene, but are promising probably more than they can actually deliver on a number of ways. But we'll talk through that as to what those expectations are. But can you do it? Can you recruit international students without these platforms? And that's the real dilemma here. Are you forced to spend your recruitment dollars now in this post-pandemic world we're living in, where digital platforms and recruitment is really your only option to reach students, since you're not doing the traveling yet, maybe not until 2023, late maybe fall 2022, you might get out there again, but we'll see. We don't have any real timelines yet in terms of when that world of recruitment is going to reopen fully. And even if it does, is that the way that you want to go as an institution? So there's a lot of different questions wrapped up in this, but can you recruit international students without these new recruitment platforms? And each platform has its own promises that they make, has its own slight variations on the theme in terms of structure. And that's frankly, as someone who's been on that other side helping service providers going to market to U.S. higher education institutions or globally, there's real challenges in distinguishing yourself in the marketplace if you're one of those platforms that's it's promising all these eyes on your profiles, your institutional profiles. How do you make sure those students that are actually getting to you, and then as an institution, the leads you receive, how qualified are they? Some of these new platforms promise you're only going to get students who are at that applicant stage. So others say you're going to get those that have expressed interests, those that have viewed your profiles. There are various distinctions that they're talking about. So we're going to get to the rub of these as we talk in reference to an article in intl. Our good friends there, student recruitment platforms, or DIY. And they make the case and provide a solid overview of what some of the challenges are, pros and cons with working with these larger providers, these student recruitment platforms, if we want to generously call these agency aggregator platforms, these lead search engine platforms, profile platforms. They each have their own uniqueness, as our proposed uniqueness. Whether they actually can deliver on those promises is always the challenge in terms of providing numbers and students that are actually going to apply and then enroll. Those are, for many of the newer ones, there's probably not a whole lot of data yet to support their success rates. Others that have been around a while certainly can provide that and have various tools that they've developed to help demonstrate their effectiveness. And that's certainly part of what you buy when you buy into these new platforms, in terms of how are you going to help me document the success or failure of working with you as an institution rep talking to one of these providers. So that is really the challenge here. And some of the pros that they mention in the article, through using these platforms, it's easy to gather student contact and academic interest information at that very top of the funnel. It has wide potential reach based on the platform's marketing spend and SEO that they're dealing with. It can be hyper-defined in terms of matching the student profile, that students that are using the site, these search sites, these recruitment platforms, to better drill down to the students you actually want to come apply to your institutions. It can be a time saver on a number of different levels for the students, for their agents, one-stop shopping type of thing, but you're never getting the real full range of options that are available, and that's really the challenge. From a larger perspective, you get what you pay for in terms of, are you in there with 500 other U.S. institutions, or are there only 50 U.S. institutions, 10 U.K. institutions, 20 Australian universities, and a number of others from around the world. So what other support do these platforms provide? Do they have online advising for students that are looking for some kind of initial help that might guide them to particular countries? And of course, the main goal of these platforms is to focus, even though they'll say that they represent all institutions, they have profiles for those universities that are paying membership fees to have their institutional information highlighted. So these platforms can have provide access for institutions that don't have name recognition yet, that are trying to get their foot in the door in particular markets. Some of the recruitment platforms that are listed here on the intl article are niche to a particular country or region. Others are quite clearly global enterprises. So the challenges are in managing that relationship, managing the expectations of what you're going to get. You can get translated content in many of these profiles to help focus your institutional message in markets that make sense for where you want to grow at your institution. Some will provide enrollment qualification type of vetting of some of these students to see if they're academically prepared, if they are obviously major matching, but beyond that, some of that's automated at some places, exclusively automated. In others, there's a human element involved. So there's a lot of possible options here. So if you're going down this route, you certainly need to do your homework on that, on what exactly they're providing. and what kind of analytics you're going to have access to help better inform and maybe adjust how you do what you do with these platforms. So there's always additional fees potentially when you make those kind of changes, but and other services that you sure can add on, but that's never really going to be upfront and are included in what you get initially. So I think what some of the cons are in terms of using these, and the article certainly points out what you're getting is you don't always have that, particularly for newer platforms, what the end result is going to look like. You can get a lot of unqualified leads that kind of just are wasted, that aren't clearly your target audiences, you have little opportunity to differentiate yourself or your institution on those platforms because you're using a common template. So it really comes down to how high you rate on their search results in terms of the level of matching. Featured institutions, as I mentioned earlier, get like platinum level versus gold level memberships get more eyes on their products. So again, distinguishing yourself against those that are paying more. Are you really getting all the best leads that you could potentially get? So it's hard to know what's happening behind the curtain and how those leads are actually getting to you. So it's you don't have really the most direct control over what happens. You have control over what content you put out there, but don't have control over how those eyes necessarily get to your content and how do you make that content stand out. So a lot of challenges in that space. But so we look at some of the mergers and acquisitions and partnerships that have developed. We talked about that last week. Some of those potentially there has to be at some point a consolidation of some of these programs because, frankly, there are too many of them out there to really be well understood. And in terms of what challenges really that will pop up, and as these programs and tools, platforms evolve, you look at some of the challenges you come into with some of these agent aggregator platforms that are supposedly basically agents around the world sign up with these aggregators to send their students to them. The aggregator gets these universities to have profiles. The greater majority are not paid profiles, that they're just the generic ones that help match to programs of interest. But those that pay get a higher profile. We'll get more leads. Obviously, we'll get leads. If you don't have to pay for a profile, you're not getting leads. But you really don't know exactly what you're getting, and that's. And you don't have control over what the students that these agents are sending to the platforms that are potentially connecting with you. You don't have control over how you're marketed with those students, to those students by those agents that are referring students. There will come a day that with the agent aggregators that will say, and even some of the non-agent aggregators, you have other platforms that are basically, they have their initial setup costs, but their main funding will come from students that come to you as a result of them using your platform, and they charge you agency commission rates, which is a little odd in terms of the way it's structured. And I won't name this particular one that does this, but it really leaves kind of an interesting impression in my mouth, or taste in my mouth, and that doesn't really sound right because they basically provide leads, and if any of those students that use their service and end up enrolling in your college, even though they don't really they provide you the data and the analytics, but that doesn't really help you recruit them necessarily, the individual students. That tells you where they're coming from, maybe helps you alter your message, but you're doing all the work as the institution other than them providing that platform that initially gets them connected with you. So to charge agency rates per student for those students that enroll at your institution seems like they're hoping to capture those get paid basically for students that might have touched their site as part of their overall college search. They may have had worked with an agent using another site, that they might have gone to Education USA. They might have done a number of other things that helped get them to you. It might have been materials that you sent them. But to just get a name and then be charged agency commission rates for the work that they did in getting you that name, if that student chooses to enroll, seems a little disingenuous, frankly. And I have problems with that model. And frankly, some of the agent aggregator models are, depending on the way they're set up, can be like that for these recruitment platforms. So I really have my concerns over some of these models where there's so many unknowns, you don't really know what you're getting, because many of them are new, certainly newer to U.S. higher ed for many of them. That you don't know exactly what kind of track record they have. Recommendations are certainly, before you sign anything, I would certainly want 2 or 3 recommendations of like-minded schools that have used these services before you say, okay, here's my $25,000 or whatever it might be that you're going to have to pay a year to be part of their platform. So these are the kinds of questions that you need to ask, and it's certainly a very complicated mix of criteria that you're dealing with. I know with a couple of the institutions that I'm working with now, these kinds of decisions, particularly if in one case an institution that's not done a lot in the international space is really trying to understand all the pieces that they're getting into and how decisions are made. So there's a lot that you want to be careful about when you go down this route for using these recruitment platforms. But talk quickly about the other option that is mentioned if you're not going to go with these various international student platforms, recruitment platforms. What is your option? And it's staring right in front of you. It's your institutional website. And the websites at college campuses, the teams have grown exponentially in the last 20, 25 years. You look in the late 90s, there was a webmaster, and that person might have had total control over the entire institutional site, but now that's clearly not possible where it's in one person's hands. They have or marketing, IT, communications have multiple people working on the website. Different departments, different units, different colleges have different focal points or individuals on the web team for the university that are responsible for their content. Admissions and recruitment often have their own marketing IT people as well to help with their piece of the pie. So there's a lot of resources that institutions are already putting into your institutional content, and with certainly a lot less cost, upfront cost. There are other kinds of costs, obviously the human cost, staff time, and all of that, but there are much lower costs in terms of making your site the best it can be if you've got the bandwidth at your campus to dedicate individuals to marketing, having some institutional marketing dollars spent on international as well, not just on the wider university. So I've even seen some universities that have worked with their international offices that work with their marketing departments to say, hey, our university international students bring so many dollars to the university. We would like, and as a percentage of the whole, we would like a percentage of the university's marketing budget to help go to promoting resources on our site for these students and driving traffic through various ads and other SEO-generated tools to bring students to our content on our site. Developing that content is obviously the larger challenge if you don't already have it. Multiple languages, versions of your content, landing pages for events or different online drivers that your application drives or virtual events that you might be doing on your platform, hosting them on your platform. Those are the things that you can do easily if you have the staff in place. Not necessarily in your international office, but certainly dedicated staff within Marcom or IT that helps you enhance your web presence for international audiences. Certainly you can really, when you do that, you're really allowing those students that get to your program, to your content on your site, to be the ones that are truly the most likely to engage and enroll. Because, hey, your information is what brought them here. Your customized information, your focused information, your multi-language information is bringing them directly to you, rather than being on a platform where you could be one of hundreds, if not thousands, of institutions that potential students are sorting through. So DIY is certainly possible, but it does require more upfront work, and there's not necessarily out-of-the-box solutions for that. That you really do need the hands-on folks within your institution to take the lead on that and be invested in that. So hopefully you can get to that point, because certainly I think there can be a balance here, and certainly I think when you have a solid website, that provides a strong foundation for everything you do. Because even with these other profile sites, recruitment sites, you still need to have the content on your site, because they're driving traffic to your site in one way or another. For them to find out more about your institution. So it's critical that your social is competent and professionally done. It means that your website needs to be top priority. Even if you are using these other platforms, but you can, with the added marketing dollars that you spend, instead of $25,000, $30,000 on a recruitment platform, can you invest some of that money in driving traffic to your to landing pages on your international site for your prospective student audiences, and making that a more robust, unique, and customizable journey for your prospective audiences, rather than a bog standard profile that you get on one of these recruitment platforms. So there can and should be some kind of blending in the ideal world of these kind of services. Some are better than others, and finding the right ones it can be a real challenge, and some work better for some campuses than others. There's a lot of different variables involved, and certainly you want to make sure that you have all the information at your disposal before you make those high dollar commitments. Now let's shift gears to our second question. Are you engaging in partnership building in India? And this is really an important question, I think, because obviously India is number 2 sender to the United States. We've been seeing, after China, we've been seeing over the last 10 years a rise of Indian undergraduates coming to the United States, and I think those numbers are only going to grow as the Indian middle class grows, and you see dissatisfaction with the amount of access to quality places on the university level, from secondary school to university level. That process of entry tests, and particularly during the pandemic, some of those haven't been able to be tested, and how are students getting in. And really, for Indian undergraduates, there are more opportunities in the U.S. now, that as parents see the value of coming over for that undergraduate degree, getting their foot in the door early for a longer-term goal of work experience, second degrees, and all of that, potential work after graduation, all of these kind of experiences that drive a lot of traffic from India. So coming, instead of just for graduate programs, starting to come more for undergrad. The numbers are still nowhere near equal, much like the Chinese numbers were. In the early 2000s, it was almost exclusively graduate, and undergrads were growing. The mid-noughties, the Chinese undergraduate numbers exploded, and the graduate kind of stayed consistent. Right now, there's a little bit more undergrad than grad Chinese. So, India, it's a much larger disparity, but those numbers are getting closer. It may be a few years before they get anywhere near that. But I think that's a market in India that is ripe for further growth. The positive moves the Biden administration has made related to travel, related to positive changes to OPT processing, to H-1B, going away from the lottery system, going back towards the lottery system, away from the higher salary requirements that the Trump administration put in place. So there's other factors, post-degree, post-study work options, that seem to be making India much more attractive again as a market for U.S. institutions, that there's more interest there. Indian students have not been able to go to Australia or New Zealand for the last 2 years. There's dissatisfaction with that, having to do remote study on their phones for Australian universities, and that's not working. They want that in-person experience. That's clear. The numbers are certainly clear on all surveys in that regard. The overwhelming majority still want that in-person experience. So the U.S. has been able to offer that. Canada has been able to offer that. The UK has been able to offer that. So they're seeing general jumps in their Indian student numbers. I think overall, longer term, the U.S. is is still the number one recipient of Indian students studying outside of India. Canada, the UK, Australia are also on that list, but certainly the U.S. has been number one and will probably still maintain that for years to come. But the playing field has gotten more competitive, as we talk about many times here on the Roundup. So partnership building is really one facet of your approach to India that for a lot of institutions has been kind of that hard nut to crack. Because the Indian higher education system is hyper-regulated in some respects. The new national education policy that was rolled out last year certainly has laid the seeds for a promising future for cooperation, but even though the government itself would only prefer the top 200 universities worldwide be setting up, be allowed to have satellite campuses in India. Many are looking at partnerships, dual degrees, joint degrees, bachelor, master combo degrees that are being seen as kind of an easier, more direct way to establish these partnerships. But it's a complex field with the university structures, the way they're approved or accredited in India, very different, and it's sometimes hard for U.S. institutions to really get a sense of what's happening on the ground. So really, there are some great resources out there that do these, that help you find your way in India, and there are a number of service providers that also work with institutions on the recruitment front that have in the past done a lot of recruitment tours that are also adding in partnership building in India that are very much India specific, that they have on the ground staff in country to help that. It could be everything from Sanam S4 to GenNext, KIC Univassist, Simple Ed. A number of these have developed these significant partnership building aspects to what they do. And it's important to have perspective as you go about these things. You know what you're paying for, what the role they're actually going to have. Some are very high-priced ventures where you have a committed staff that you're paying the salary for, basically, to be an in-country rep for you. Other universities that have had large histories of Indians coming to their campuses for degrees have set up gateways, like Indiana University and Ohio State have IU Gateway, or have gateway campuses or offices in India that serve as kind of a clearinghouse for student interest in their institutions for that country. That staff person that does the recruitment meets with the institutions that they might want to partner with. So there's a lot that goes on in that, and it's really something that I think is something more institutions need to be doing. How that gets done is really the key to your individual success, what will work for your campus. What I would suggest, though, there is a free webinar coming up or workshop coming up in December. Virtual workshop December 7th and 8th that IIE is offering. I'm dropping the link to the sign up for those virtual workshops. It's an expression of interest survey that you need to fill out by Friday this week. So the link to that kind of informational site from IIE is in the chat section on the comment section on the Facebook Live event for this live chat. You can also find it in our newsletter. So that came out on Friday. You can go to smieconsulting.subscribe or /subscribe, smieconsulting.org/subscribe. Go to this week's edition for October 18th, and you can get the link to that as well. So really important, worthwhile attending. It's a free service, but that will give you the overview of how those relationships can and should be approached when if your institution's looking to partner with Indian institutions, like-minded institutions. Now our third question, we'll get to it just briefly here, and that is, what are your strategic plan priorities at your institution. We've been talking a lot about what strategic plans what often the failures are for strategic plans in terms of making the budget be the driver for the plan rather than the mission. But there's some other interesting sub questions that get involved with strategic plans. But 3 quick successes or keys to success, I think, that an Inside Higher Ed article pointed out this past week. And this is relevant whether it's an institution-wide plan or your own international ed plan, that I think these messages both apply. The 3 quick ones, steps that they suggest: ensure that your marketing leader has a seat at the table from day one. And that's something that there was a survey. This article is based on a study that was done of 108 strategic plans in every state. 45 or 42% of those plans identified the constituencies from which committee members came. That of those 45 plans that had listed people, only 17 had marketing and communication leadership at the table for those as part of the core steering committee. And the article and the study kind of make clear that it's not surprising, frankly, that institutions don't have marketing at the table for the initial conversations, because their job is to get the word out about the activities within the strategic plan. But what marketing does also have is more of a strategic focus in terms of how they plan things, that to have them thinking about what directions the university are going from the outset, they can get a jump start on where the institution might need to move on that marketing side. The second piece is make sure the expression of your mission looks outward, and that you're creating a planning process that does too, so that it's not just we want to grow our own population, it's why we want to grow, what impact we want to have on the larger community, on our state, on our region, whatever it might say. So that also means having representation from your community on the board outside the university, I think, was where we would see that as an important goal. And that the final third point is focus more on positioning and less on branding. That's an important distinction, I think, that language regarding strategic plans, more than 40% refer to marketing plans, mention market position or positioning only a few times overall. That while it's mentioned, the focus is not really on being X. It's being this kind of like a university that wants to be an R1 research institution. That's a position, less a brand. That you want to be the most diverse institution in your state, in your region. That you want to do X, Y, and Z. That because it's not your brand on we want our campus to be X, Y, or Z. We want to be positioned as the leader or the authority in whatever field, whatever subject, whatever goal that you have. Branding will help you get the word out outside your institution, obviously, but that doesn't really mean that's a driver. That should not be a driver for the strategic plan, branding. Branding will be an element of getting you to where, of when you get to that point and what you're driving towards, but it's not the motivation necessarily. So I think that's important distinctions, and this Inside Higher Ed article is certainly worth a read. Sorry we don't have time to go in more depth to it, but happy to have these larger strategic planning conversations as well if your institution is looking to go down that road, particularly on the international side. That certainly can help you with that. So if we're looking forward again to chatting about these topics and more in the weeks and months to come. That's all we have for you this week on the Roundup, but we appreciate your attention and we'll look forward to chatting with you again soon. Cheers.